Joining me now to talk about all of it, plus the top priorities for the Congressional Black Caucus in the new year, is the chair of that caucus, Nevada Congressman Steven Horsford. Congressman, Mr. Chairman, thank you for being with us. Let me start with the state of play in Washington. Democrats in the Senate have delayed their holiday break to work on a military aid bill for Israel and Ukraine that could also include border security measures. Republicans have requested, they discussed this, and earlier today, Homeland Security Secretary Mayorkas met with Senate negotiators at the U.S. Capitol with no framework reported having emerged on border or immigration reforms, but some signs of progress, according to Senate participants. Still, as we mentioned, GOP House leadership has already gone on recess. What are you hearing about how this will play out, Mr. Chairman?
Well, good evening, Reverend Al. It's great to be on. Thank you for having me. Congratulations to the FAMU Rattlers who just beat the Howard Bison. I'm here in Georgia to help defend my colleague, Congresswoman Lucy McBath and Congresswoman Nikema Williams, who are under assault by extreme MAGA Republicans who want to deny equal representation here in the congressional representation in Congress. But we had an opportunity to go out and celebrate the game today. So congratulations to the Rattlers. But as you were saying, we have very key, important issues still facing the Congress because Republican obstruction has prevented...
Let me stop you right there for 1 second, because we had Congresswoman Lucy McBath on, and that's one of the things I mentioned in the opening, is they are redistricting all over the country, particularly in the South. And we'll get to the priorities of the caucus, but that has to be a concern to you.
Well, look, as you know, and I want to commend the National Action Network and so many other organizations that are leading this fight. The Georgia Republican legislature and governor have defied the Supreme Court's ruling and order to pass constitutional districts that ensure fair representation and the voice for Black voices and voters here in the state of Georgia. And unfortunately, because of what the Republicans in the Georgia legislature did, they literally are trying to deny Lucy McBath the opportunity to continue to serve in the House of Representatives. And so as the chair of the Black Caucus, I'm here to send a very clear message that we will not allow that to happen, just as we worked to protect equal representation and the Black voices in Alabama and Louisiana. We're here in the state of Georgia to make sure that we protect fair and equal representation in these congressional lines as they are decided by the courts.
Now, and the reason I wanted you to address that is because we are literally seeing a methodical attempt to disenfranchise Black voters by drawing lines that would cost Black representation in the Congress. So this is a sense of urgency I don't think a lot of people are getting. They're literally drawing lines that draw people into districts that are members of your caucus that they will have a hard time getting reelected. Republicans would get elected, and it would bring down the number of Black representation in the Congress. We're talking about an existential threat to some of the members of your caucus in the Congressional Black Caucus.
Yeah, and in addition to just the threat of the number of members, it's about denying the voices of Black voters in the state of Georgia like they attempted to do in Alabama and Louisiana. Look, Reverend Al, we've talked about this before, right? These are people who are trying to have a direct assault on our democracy. And how have they done it? They've done it by denying and suppressing voters. They've done it by trying to pack Black voters into districts or to pass illegal and unconstitutional and, in fact, discriminatory boundaries for both congressional lines as well as legislative lines. And so as the Congressional Black Caucus, we are working hard to make sure that that does not happen and that we are in a position with our allies to pass maps that are fair. And we're going to do that on behalf of my colleague, Representative Lucy McBath, here in the state of Georgia.
And that is why I've been saying to people, this is not about a fight between who's the oldest or whatever. We're talking about some interest here that was won with bloodshed, jailings, even death to get the right to vote, that is not possibly under siege, is under siege as we speak. Also, as we deal with the Congress coming back, before House Republicans left town this week, they voted unanimously for an impeachment inquiry into President Biden, even though they offered zero evidence of a crime. What is the point of this probe, Congressman?
Well, the Republican attempt is to distract from the fact that Republicans have no agenda for the American people. In fact, they are trying to take away freedoms, protections, and rights for the American people, whether that's women's rights to make their own health care decisions, our rights to have access to the ballot box, or all of the freedoms that we hold dear in this country, including the rights to economic justice, which is a major focus of the Congressional Black Caucus going into the 2024 congressional year. The House Republicans have no basis of evidence to bring this impeachment. In fact, their own people who testified in the hearings could not state with any evidence why they were bringing this impeachment inquiry against President Biden. And that is why it's important that every one of us do what we can to show up and to make sure that our voices are heard in the upcoming 2024 elections.
Now, while you're talking about that, let's quickly get to some other topics that of interest, because I don't think, again, a sense of urgency with all Americans understand that the last half a century of social justice for women, for blacks, for other people that have been discriminated against, they are literally trying to wipe out. One of the things you mentioned, economic justice and economic empowerment. Your caucus issued a letter to America's corporate leaders yesterday calling for an update on diversity commitments made after the murder of George Floyd in 2020. Your call for accountability comes at a time when many on the right are attacking the mere existence of diversity programs and distorting. A guy in New York, billionaire, is attacked the president of Harvard saying she's a DEI person that got the job for that reason. I mean, literally attacking the things that was achieved. What are you expecting to hear from these companies as members of Congress that can hold them accountable in these areas?
Well, what we expect from corporate America is that they will, number one, affirm their commitments to diversity, equity, and inclusion to make sure that within their companies they're doing everything to uplift the voices of people of color within their companies, to ensure representation at the highest levels from the C-suite to the board of directors. We are asking for information about the impact that their companies are making in the communities in which their companies operate and the investments that they are making. And finally, we're asking what they are doing to advance national policy around closing the racial wealth gap, which if we were able to close the racial wealth gap based on parity here in America, for Black Americans, it would mean creating 650,000 more Black-owned small businesses. It would help lift 30 million Black Americans into the middle class. It would save 3 million Black lives a year, because when you improve the economic conditions of Black people, you improve their health outcomes. These are the issues that the Congressional Black Caucus are working on, along with the Black Economic Alliance, the National Urban League, the National Action Network, the NAACP, and others, because we understand economic justice is social justice in this moment.
Now, you and several members of the CBC were in Atlanta this week to tour an affordable housing complex. Rapper Tip Harris Brother T.I. call him, recently opened up in the city's Buckhead neighborhood, incorporating retail space and community gardens with more than 140 residential units, many of them subsidized for homeless and at-risk residents. What can you tell us about this project?
Well, I want to thank Representative Nikema Williams for identifying this project. You know, one of the biggest issues that our constituents talk to us about all across the country is the need to provide more access to affordable housing, whether it's in my home state of Nevada in Las Vegas, where rents have increased 30% since 2019, or communities all across the country, including here in Atlanta. And so with the project that we are touring and the investments that are being made, we're looking at ways in which we can develop public-private partnerships to bring down the cost of housing, to make housing more affordable, particularly home ownership for first-time home buyers, and to help create wealth for Black Americans. And one of the ways to do that is by building equity through home ownership. This also helps lift up Black communities by increasing the values of our communities and making sure that investments through banks, venture capital firms, and others are invested in our community in ways that tackle critical issues like access to affordable housing. So I want to commend Representative Nikema Williams and other members who are working to bring these type of innovative projects, because these are the types of examples that we're working to uplift along with the Biden-Harris administration. I want to give a shout out to Vice President Harris, who was here with us in Atlanta for the game today. She is everywhere trying to make sure that we are meeting the people where they are and that we're putting people over politics in this moment.
Yeah, I saw her in the first, second gentleman was there at the game, and but also dealing with these issues. I'm going to stay on these issues because, again, I think people need to have a sense of urgency about them, and we're going to stay on them on this show. And as you know, I work as president of National Action Network on these issues day and night. We are in a real state of siege. Thank you for being with us, the chair of the Congressional Black Caucus. I might also tell you, Mr. Chairman, Congresswoman Nikema Williams, who you mentioned a couple of times, will be on this show tomorrow night. Steve Horsford, always good to have you with us.